Hey guys, welcome to another video. This one is a review of a SPAC merger. It's RTP merging with Joby Aviation. So Joby is pretty cool. They are an air taxi company. They want to build a ride-hailing service, basically, that operates in the sky. They want to do it with what are called EVTOL aircraft, vertical takeoff and landing, except they want to build electric EVTOL aircraft. In fact, they are building these things. So basically, this business model has it all, right? It's a combination of drones, EVs, ride sharing, robo-taxis, you name it. All of the cool technology basically is coming together in one company. So it's pretty exciting, and I think this one is a pretty cool opportunity. So I've got a bull and a bear case on this one. I got a bunch of points for it. I've got a few points against it. I want to tell you the story behind all of those. And at the end, I want to give you my opinion on which case wins. Let's go. Okay, so before we get into the bull and the bear case, I want to take a look at the business. And really, this is a technology business, so I think it probably warrants a close look at the technology and where the current state of the technology is. So, I think that's really why Joby is doing what they're doing right now, because all of the technology components that this particular business needs is now sort of converging to the point where all of the technology is maturing, it's ready, and I think it makes sense to put it together in this kind of business right now because all of these things do work to a degree. So, electric vehicle technology is making this whole air taxi thing possible where it wasn't before, and there's a number of different reasons for this. First off, it's clean technology. These vehicles can actually be charged up using renewable power resources. So I think, if you're about to build a new mass transit system, it's absolutely got to be clean. This one is because it's 100% electric vehicle powered. It's a heck of a lot safer too. That was the thing holding back some of the helicopter robo-taxi type services, before EVs were viable. This is safe because, the EV drive systems can be made redundant in the aircraft, whereas a conventional helicopter is going to be powered by only a single rotor, single point of failure, obviously. With this approach, with multiple drive systems, one or two or even more than that can fail, and you can still safely land this thing, which is pretty cool. The noise factor is absolutely huge. Basically, these things need to be able to operate in dense urban neighborhoods if they want to move people around. It's absolutely key for passenger vehicles. And not only that, but they have to be quiet enough to operate at nighttime, ideally. And, EV technology and these EV drive systems have now gotten to the point where that is true. These things are quiet enough that you can have a conversation in them and you can have a conversation right beside them. So I think some of those barriers to adoption are falling away that neighborhoods would otherwise put up in terms of noise levels. The battery tech has now gotten to the point where this sort of thing is viable as well, too, right? Because energy density in the batteries is now to the point where the batteries are light enough that you can actually put them in an aircraft and the whole thing can be viable, and you can actually have enough power to not only lift the aircraft but also the weight of the passengers and other things that are in the thing. That's only now becoming possible. Same thing applies to the materials and the construction of the electric drive systems. Those are also now light enough to make air systems viable. The charge time is here now too, right? These things will absolutely require fast charging. You can't take a quick ride in one and then let it sit idle overnight, right? To enable a robo-taxi sort of model, you have to be able to charge these things in a half hour and get them back into the air. Technology is there for that as well. The autonomous driving technology is coming as well. I think we're seeing the same thing in vehicles, in ground-based vehicles, where it's all about driver assist, where it's sort of helping you drive. In the pilot-based model, it's really important there because what's happening is the assistive systems are reducing the need for complex pilot training, right? So as those assistive systems get better and better and the software gets better and better, you don't need to be a highly skilled pilot, you need to be a moderately skilled pilot. And then as it gets even better, the required skill level for that pilot drops. And so I don't think we're there yet, but we're close to a sweet spot where the average person could potentially get certified to fly one of these things pretty quickly. So if the regulatory framework lines up, in the near future, then things will click, and I think we'll have solved that pilot problem through assistive piloting technologies. We're very close to that. There's a lot of surrounding infrastructure required for any kind of air taxi service in terms of the air traffic control systems, the peer-to-peer communications between aircraft for collision avoidance and all that kind of thing, the software and the air traffic control systems and the communication systems. All of those infrastructure components are now getting there, and they're being driven forward by some of the underlying drone technology in terms of monitoring drones, surveillance drones, and cargo drones. All of these applications are driving improvements in, the software and the control systems and the communications to the point where it's now getting ready for air taxis carrying passengers. And so really all of those technological improvements are what is making Joby's business model viable right now. Not just Joby, there's a bunch of other companies that are taking advantage of the same thing. So I think what we're seeing is that the viability of this thing is sort of at ground zero right now and is getting to the point where it may actually be investable. So if we take a look at the deal here and the specifics of this one, the valuation is pretty eye-watering. It basically values Joby at 6.6 billion or 4.6 if you look at the amount of cash, or if you subtract the amount of cash that's going into the balance sheet after the deal. Whichever way you want to look at it, though, that's a lofty valuation. On the one hand, it's a good thing. Joby's getting a pile of cash to burn through here, 1.5 billion over the next few years while they try to reach that profitability number whenever it happens, right? Whether they're going to have to dilute in the meantime, they claim not, but how do you predict the future from here to 2026-ish? And really that's what this valuation is based on, right? It's based on a revenue multiple way out into 2026. It's really, really hard to predict the future that far out. So is this valuation reasonable? Well, if they pull that kind of number together in 2026, sure, it's reasonable. But if they miss that, then obviously it's off the mark, right? So it's all about what they can do between now and then.
What's the upside potential?
Okay, but all that said, let's take a look at the deal. So on the bull case, point number one here is I like the SPAC deal itself. I like the fact that there's a lockup on this one. Kind of rare. You don't see this very often. So I think it might control some of the dilution we might otherwise see. I like the fact that there's price targets actually set here on the lockup periods and the vestment for some of the founder shares. I think that actually might make for a healthier business go forward. It makes this less likely to be a bit of a fly-by-night operation, right? So that's a good thing. I like Joby's business model here on vertical integration. I always say this is what you want. And vertical integration for Joby is kind of unique because it's about the ride-sharing service. So basically the Uber stuff, the app and the scheduling and the routing and all that kind of thing. They've got that. And they've actually got the hardware. They're actually making the aircraft. So the fact that they control both sides of that business and they're able to put the two together and then fine tune and react really quickly as new requirements come out and new use cases and additional services and all that kind of thing. These guys are actually really able to control both ends of that. So they can very quickly change an aircraft design to meet a particular need, and they can very quickly change the software and the control systems and the actual business, the app basically, that's running it as well. Some of the other competitors out there are either doing one or the other. Joby's a little bit unique in that they're doing both. Next point here is that the aircraft stats are pretty impressive. Until I started looking into this, I had no idea that passenger aircraft, EVs, were this capable in terms of range, the top speed, 200 miles an hour. They can actually carry a pilot and 4 people. So it's actually viable in terms of a group travel situation, economy of scale. I think it's absolutely there. The noise level is where it needs to be at 65 decibels. Safety is there, and there's a lot of expertise in behind the vehicle here. This is the result of 10 years of development and engineering to be able to produce this thing. So it's really impressive. And if you look at these technical stats, it goes a long way to convincing you that maybe it's ready for market. So the next point here is that Joby actually acquired Uber Elevate in January of this year. So Uber sort of spun that off to focus on their core business. Joby snapped it up and absorbed all of those assets. So, I think that really pushes them way ahead in terms of the intellectual property associated with the app, associated with all the scheduling and the back-end systems that Uber would have contributed to that, and also the integration of that with air systems that they're going to actually need. So I think that's a pretty key acquisition for them that actually shot them ahead in time, and they're actually now much further along than they were the day before that deal was closed. Joby seems to be really tight with the U.S. military, and they're working in collaboration with the FAA to actually try to fast track some of this certification, which makes sense. I think the military has a key interest here in EVTOL capability. They want it. They want to actually see it succeed. They actually want to see it get past these certification hurdles. The next point here is that this is, of course, solving a real problem. And I mean, I think that's blindingly obvious, right? When you think about traffic congestion and the crumbling infrastructure that's supporting roadways and bridges and all that kind of thing, getting people out of that congested mess and actually reducing the pressure on the ground-based infrastructure solves an absolutely enormous problem. So if government is not 110% behind this, then they're crazy. They absolutely should be. So I think federal, state governments, and other governments around the world are actually going to see this as a key solution to the whole idea of urban traffic network collapse, as they say here, and they're absolutely solving a real problem.
Let's talk about risk.
Okay, so first up in the bear case, and it's common with these SPAC deals, right, is, I think they're overly optimistic in terms of their revenue, not so much on the numbers, but in terms of time and when it will happen. There's a lot of obstacles here to overcome. There's a lot of risk to overcome. So claiming that they're actually going to, achieve real commercial operations in 2024 and then profitability in 2025 from where they are right now, that seems unbelievably aggressive given all the obstacles that are in front of them. So I think that's one to be really, really cautious of. There's industry data out there that have, tried to put estimates in terms of when this will happen. And, there's one here from Porsche Consulting, and, it's not as optimistic as Joby. Mind you, this is an older report. So, you could argue that there's better data now than there was back then. But still, I think that commercial viability and actually getting to a really profitable, viable, busy air traffic service is going to take longer than Joby thinks. And I think the risk with that is that investors are going to become impatient. They're going to see these inevitable delays, and I think the stock price is probably going to suffer. So that's really the bear case risk in terms of getting in now, is you're inevitably in for a series of disappointments, I think, over time as things take a little bit longer than they should, and you might see your investment lose money. I took a quick look at the competition out there, and I think that Joby is in fact in the lead, so that's a good thing. I think though that it is possible for competitors to catch up with them. I don't know if they have as wide a moat as I might like. And there's a point to be made here in terms of the aircraft design and what's happening here. Joby has gone all the way to the transition phase with their tilting design. Basically what happens is the rotors will actually fold back so that you can get the majority of your lift in cruising mode from the fixed wing components, which is great. It's super efficient and it makes a ton of sense. But because of the complexity and the risk and the control systems associated with that model, certification is going to take a very long time. So Joby's working on that, and I'm sure they'll absolutely get there. And I kind of like the fact that they picked the most capable model and they're trying to leapfrog right there immediately. But I think there is some risk that a simpler design could fill in some of the niches before Joby can actually achieve widespread certification in some jurisdictions. So, the next point is kind of in that same vein, right? There are 4 basic barriers to acceptance for this kind of thing that Porsche Consulting has identified here. One is the aircraft system and the technology. I think Joby's getting there, but it still requires work. Certification and the legal framework surrounding the whole thing, that's still in a state of flux, and that's jurisdictionally dependent. It's going to vary in different countries and different states and that kind of thing. So there's an uphill battle to be fought there that's potentially going to take a longer time than they might think. There's social acceptance, right? Are people actually going to want to get in these things? I think early adopters will, but how widespread is it going to become? It's hard to say at this point. It's probably good, but we don't know. And the last point here is the one that really concerns me on the bear case, which is infrastructure build out, right? You need a lot of places for these things to land and take off and be charged and all that kind of thing. So that needs to be developed over time. And, especially in these congested cities, that actual real estate is very limited. It's very expensive. And it's difficult to see how that one's going to play out in the future. And the last point I'll make here in the bear case gets back to that same infrastructure argument. I think that there's a possibility here that government is going to have to step in and heavily regulate the public infrastructure associated with air taxis. There's going to be intense competition for landing pad space and all that kind of thing. And I think given the regulation that's in place now with airspace, I think you might see governments extend regulatory frameworks into those ground-based facilities for EVTOL aircraft within cities and that kind of thing. And I think that could further slow things down, right? As those regulatory frameworks are slowly and painfully developed and put in place at the speed of government, I think that's liable to hold back this particular business model more than we'd like. Okay, guys, let's sum this one up. So look, I think the bull case is all about the technology, right? Like it's all coming together, it's all gelling, it all makes total sense. The technology does seem to be here, which is awesome. It's really exciting, solves a problem. Bull case is super strong based on the technology. The bear case is based on timing, to my mind, right? I think if it weren't for the SPAC business model, we wouldn't have heard about Joby in the public markets for another couple of years. But, given the fact that SPACs are doing this, that they're taking these earlier stage companies public earlier than they otherwise would, right? It's good in the sense that we're getting the opportunity to invest in these things early stage. The downside is that we then have to be just as patient as those private investment firms are in terms of letting the business develop. I'm not sure the public markets have the same level of patience, and I'm concerned about the stock price in the next 2 to 3 years as delays happen. That said, I still think the bull case wins because the technology is so awesome and the need that it solves is so crucial to the planet right now. I think everybody recognizes this, and I think there's going to be a lot of backers pushing this one forward really, really aggressively. So I think if you're a long-term investor, if you can be patient and if you can hold this one through the ups and the downs that it's going to experience, then I think you're eventually going to be rewarded. I think it's a good stock. All right, guys, please throw the video a like if this helped you out. Subscribe, ring the bell, and I'll see you in the next one.